Not too long ago, I was on top of the tech world with a 9-figure fortune. Less than a year later, it was all gone. I lost $100 million, not because of some big market crash, but because I ignored the best before date on my own company. This is the story of the psychological trap that cost me everything, and how you can avoid making the same ego-driven mistake. The heart of it? My ego. I was young, you know? You always think things are just going to keep getting better. But fate can be a little fickle. It all kicked off in 1998. The dot-com boom was in full swing, and I co-founded a company called Linux Care. We were pioneers, the first major company to dedicate itself to supporting open-source software for big enterprises. The idea felt electric. In that era of just boundless optimism, it felt like we were strapped to a rocket ship. We raised money from top-tier venture capitalists like Kleiner Perkins, and the company grew at a blinding pace. We went from just a few of us co-founders to over 100 people in less than a year. That kind of hypergrowth is intoxicating. It really feels like you just can't lose. The numbers on our spreadsheets started to look like fantasy football scores. As we were getting ready for our IPO, my personal stake on paper just soared. It blew past 10, then 50, and then, unbelievably, $100 million. I was in my early 30s. I had a young family and a paper fortune that felt more like a video game high score than real life the world saw a success story. And if I'm being honest, I saw it too. My ego was getting a 7-course meal delivered every single day. I felt like we were the ones making the rules. I truly believed we were building something that would change the world, and that our upward trajectory was infinite. The story was just perfect. The optimism didn't just feel like a mood, it felt like a law of physics. We were on the right side of history, and the market was going to reward us for it. The only question wasn't if we'd succeed, but just how huge that success would be. But even on a rocket ship, you feel some turbulence. As we were in the final stages of the IPO, the market started getting jittery. The Nasdaq, which had been this relentless bull, began to show signs of weakness. It wasn't a crash yet, just a hesitation, a flicker of doubt in the market's collective mind. Internally, though, we were still full steam ahead. The momentum and the sheer inertia of a pre-IPO company are massive. It's a freight train. You can't just tap the brakes. But this little voice in the back of my head started whispering. It's the kind of thought you push away because it's inconvenient. It was a gut feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was the peak, that this perfect moment, the valuation, the market excitement, the whole story was as good as it was ever going to get. This was the best before date. It wasn't on a calendar. It was a feeling. It was the subtle shift from effortless growth to a sense of struggle. And that is a really difficult thing to admit to yourself when you're at the helm and everyone's looking to you for confidence. I learned a hard lesson right then. If you're planning your life or business more than 6 months out, you're just guessing. The world moves way too fast. We had offers to be acquired. Big offers, the kind that would have been life-changing for me, my employees, for everyone. But they weren't the IPO number. They weren't that $100 million validation my ego was desperately craving. So, we held on, convinced the best was still to come. And then, that hesitation in the market turned into a full-blown panic. The dot-com bubble burst. It wasn't a slow leak, it was a violent explosion. Our IPO window didn't just close. It was slammed shut, bolted, and barricaded. Suddenly, the venture capital funding that had been a fire hose of cash dried up completely. The entire world changed in a matter of months. We were forced into round after round of brutal layoffs. These weren't just names on a spreadsheet. These were incredible, brilliant people who had left secured jobs to take a chance on our vision. I can still feel the guilt, the regret, that feeling of letting every single one of them down. It was a horrible, suffocating death for a company. And my $100 million? It just evaporated. It went from a number that could set my family up for generations to absolute zero. The common stock became worthless. Some of the preferred investors got a little money back, but for the founders and the employees, it was all gone. It's one thing to lose money. It's another thing entirely to watch a dream you've poured your life into crumble to dust, taking the livelihoods of people you respect with it. The fall wasn't just financial, it was psychological. It was 18 months of pure hell. I had made promises to my family, to my wife, telling her it would all be worth it. That the late nights, the constant stress, the 2 phones I carried everywhere, that it would all pay off. And then you realize you never get that time back, and those promises don't always work out. That was the bottom. So, what really happened? How does a company with that much promise and a founder with a 9-figure net worth end up with nothing? The answer is the first and most important lesson I learned. I fell right into the optimism trap. Optimism is an entrepreneur's superpower. It's what lets you stare into the abyss of total uncertainty and take that leap. But that same superpower, if you don't keep it in check, becomes a fatal flaw. It creates a reality distortion field around you. You start to believe your own hype. My optimism completely blinded me to the warning signs. It convinced me to move the goalposts. An acquisition offer of $50 million, which should have felt incredible, suddenly looked like a failure compared to a hypothetical $100 million IPO. Your ego gets tangled up in the valuation. You think that number is a reflection of you, of your worth. It's not. It's just a snapshot of a moment in time, dictated by fickle market forces you absolutely do not control. My desire for that bigger number, for the public validation of an IPO, overrode the rational decision to take a life-changing deal. I wasn't thinking about risk. I was only thinking about the upside. That's the trap. You get so focused on how much more you can win that you completely forget how much you have to lose. If you've ever felt trapped by your own goals, or if any of this is hitting home, let me know in the comments. I really do read all of them. And hey, if you're getting some value out of this, consider subscribing. You can learn from my mistakes without having to make them yourself. This brings me to the second critical lesson. Every company, and maybe every career, has a best before date. It's that moment when your passion, the market's excitement, and the company's momentum are all at their absolute peak. It is the perfect time to sell, to exit, or to make a major pivot. The hardest part: this date is totally invisible. You don't get a calendar notification for Linux Care. That date was probably in the months right before the market turned, back when we had those acquisition offers. My optimism and my ego kept me from seeing it, and I fell into this same trap again later in my career. I founded another company, Technorati, which was a pioneering blog search engine. We raised over $70 million. It was a fantastic product that people genuinely loved. But again, I held on too long. The market shifted, social media exploded, and the blogosphere we were serving completely changed. We eventually sold the company, but for pennies on the dollar. I had missed the best before date. Again, this isn't just about trying to time the market. It's about being brutally honest with yourself. Are you still the right person to lead the company into its next chapter? Is your passion still burning as bright as it once was? Or are you just holding on because this company has become your identity? Recognizing that date means you have to shed your ego and look at the business with cold, hard discipline. The antidote to that optimism trap is the discipline of realism. This isn't about being a pessimist. It's about being relentlessly data-driven and honest. I learned this the hard way at Technorati. In the early days, I'd add features because I thought they were cool, not because data showed they would actually help the business. I was the product manager and the customer. That's a total ego-driven approach, and it's a huge mistake. The discipline of realism means asking tough questions. What does the data say? Are we truly serving our customers? Does this decision move us closer to a sustainable business? This discipline also applies to hiring and scaling. There's a classic mistake that young founders make. When you have a problem, you just throw more people at it. But adding people increases communication costs and can actually slow things down. I learned that you have to hire slow and fire fast. You have to really understand the physics of your business before you start hiring ahead of your revenue. And most critically, it means you have to understand the fine print. When you take venture capital, you are often giving up control. Your investors might have rights that can block a sale you want to make. Their payout structure could mean you get nothing in an exit that looks successful from the outside. You have to be a realist about the game you're playing. It's not just about building a great product. It's about building a great business and understanding the mechanics of value, control, and the exit. Losing $100 million was a brutal, painful experience, but the lessons it taught me were priceless. First, watch out for the optimism trap. Your greatest strength can become your Achilles heel if it isn't balanced with a healthy dose of realism. Second, learn to recognize your best before date. Know when you're at the peak and have the courage to act, even if it means letting go. And third, cultivate the discipline of realism. Use data, understand your business model, and be brutally honest with yourself. Failure is a huge part of the entrepreneurial journey, but it's not the end. I've since founded several other companies applying these very hard-won lessons. Just remember, failing doesn't make you a failure, but quitting does. The real key is to learn from the fire, not just get burned by it.